Okay. It says going live.
Oh, we're live. Hey y'all, I'm James Wright, and welcome to the shop. Today we are working on the tool tote, which is right here. So last time we did the resawing of the material, cutting out the divider, and then we did the gluing up on it. Now, I made a big mistake in that I told everyone last week, make sure you have your hot water in your pipe and be soaking your stick for 2 days ahead of time. And I put the reminder in my calendar so that I would make sure to start soaking the stick 2 days ahead of time. And then I came down tonight and was like, oh, yeah, I was supposed to do that, wasn't I? So I'm going to be kind of pantomiming this tonight, but it'll be showing you the exact same steps all the way through it. So hopefully, if you are doing this right along, your stick has been soaking for the last 2 days, and we can move on from that.
So are you the meme where it was you had one job?
Yes, exactly. Sorry. Yeah, I just got back from Alabama. We were down there in Georgia, Madison, Georgia, and we were down at the Peach Meet, which is the largest tool sale in the South, and that was an absolute blast. I bought a bunch of things. I got some parts for my 45 that I've been missing the cam. I got a saw filing jig, and so this will allow me to hold the file at precisely the same angle. You do some restoration on it. Let's see, I got a whole bunch of other things, but one thing that I got that I'm really excited about is I purchased 32 straight razor blades, and these are hand forged in Massachusetts years ago, back when they actually used straight razors, and I bought 35 of them. So I'm actually going to be doing a project here soon making the covers for them, because they are just the rough cast, the rough hand forged and then hardened, so they still need to be sharpened. But then I'm going to be making the full cover for them. So this will be a video coming up here soon. And I'm going to be then selling the kits with the blade, the brass pin, and everything you need to make your own. And then we'll be doing another live build here soon so we can actually go through making your own straight razor. So stay tuned for that. As soon as I figure out all of that, I'm actually going to be selling the blades so you can buy those ahead of time. But I'm really looking forward to that.
So should we have a competition? Like if you get so many subscribers that like we get to shave you live with your beard.
Sarah gets to play the part of Sweeney Todd.
I'm just saying, if you got like a crazy amount of subscribers and we shaved your beard live with it, I think that'd be funny.
You would want my beard shaved?
No, but I would be happy to get that many subscribers.
So I got a few other things as well, and I'll be bringing those up as we go. And I've got some other interesting things coming down the pipe.
Poor man wants to know how much.
How much? I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do for the razors yet. Depending upon the brass rod and because I'll have the pattern for it, the brass rods. I'm going to have 2 different brass rods of pairs, as well as the blank itself. So I'm thinking it's going to be around $20-25. But I have to figure out some things here, so that's what I'm looking at. And I've been trying, because I only was able to get 35 of these. So when they sell out, they sell out. And I was trying to find another place where I could buy something similar, and I haven't yet found one. So if anyone knows a place where you could buy straight razor blanks, just the steel blank, let me know. But until then, we'll just have 35 of them. So I think that's about it before we dive into it. So what we did is last time we glued up this panel, and we kept the factory sides relatively smooth, the surface sides, and then we have the rough side on the back that we have from our resawing. So for what we need to do is we have a glue seam coming down here. We need to clean that up. So I'm going to put that in here. Any questions before I really dive into this?
Nope.
Good. And the easiest way to clean up glue is with a card scraper. And so I have my Wood by Wright card scraper. You can buy those on my website. Because, oh, it's up here. Because nothing says better than a blue card scraper. Come on, change over. There we go. And in this case, the great thing about this is we also have the marks on top from laying it out. See, that one's not cutting very well, but it's at least getting that up. I'm getting a little bit of wisp, but I'm also getting a lot of dust on here. So I'm going to sharpen this up. And this is actually something I've been playing with. This is a different burnisher. It's a carbide rod, but it is also an unfinished carbide rod. So I'm playing with this, and if I like it, I think I'm going to start selling some burnisher kits. But I've been having a lot of fun with this. Just a few strokes on that, and now, catch it on here. There we go. There's the wisps I'm looking for. Which side did I sharpen? That side. And now we can come in here and clean off all those marks. And just like that, have a nice smooth surface. One of the things I love about card scrapers, they make glue removal and cleaning off any marks and things like that really, really quick and easy. Now the problem we have is we have this bottom, and we cut all these grooves in our ends and side panels, but our bottom is thicker than the grooves. The bottom's like around 3/8, and our groove is about 1/4 inch. So how do we get that in there? What I like is I like to keep this rough surface on the bottom of the board. I like to be able to see this afterward. It shows that it was hand cut. It has that texture to it. If you don't like that, then you just plane this whole thing down to the right thickness. And once it's all planed down smooth, then it will fit in. But what I like to do is actually pillow it. So we're just going to be hitting the outside corners, put those at an angle so that those will then fit into the groove. So I've already done that on 2 of the sides. And now we're going to do the other 2 sides. So for that, I'm going to put it here on the edge, put it between 2 dogs, clamp it in. And then I have a number 4.5 that I have set relatively aggressive because I don't need this to be terribly pretty. I just need it to take off material here. Let me refocus. And so rather than keeping the plane flat on the work, we're actually going to tip it slightly. And I'm going to lift it up so that the outside of the blade is about 1/2 inch off the work. Just set around that corner, skew it a little bit so I'm not going straight down the board, I'm going at a bit of an angle. I'm just going to hit it here where it's a little bit thicker. And then I'm going to make sure I actually clamp it in place. I like the laugh, babe. Yeah, let's try this again.
I wish I had a slow-mo for that.
So I'm just making sure that I take it down a little bit, and then I'm going to grab the edge of this. I'm going to grab the end piece that I have here, and I'm going to see if it fits in. It fits in here, but it doesn't fit in here, 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 it doesn't fit all the way along there. So I still have a while to go, but like right here, I am in where I need to be. Oh my word. Order of operation. I was jumping into it because I really like doing the pillowing here. First thing we have to do is joint up this edge because this is still rough from the saw. So I'm going to put that in here. Cramp this down. And then I'm going to grab, let's grab the low angle. Why? Because I can. Normally I'm going to grab my number 5, but my number 5 is set up for another operation right now. So I'm going to grab this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run along this and just see where's it hitting. So it's hitting right here in the corner. It's hitting here in the middle. This is currently set up for a really, really low pass. So make sure you make it a little bit more aggressive. Because I want to take off some material here. There we go. Maybe a little bit more aggressive still. And you hear it skip, 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 skip. So eventually you'll get a curl that'll go from one end to the other. Almost there. There we go. Now I got a curl that will go from one end to the other. And what I can do on this is I can check its length. And we can put that here on the end piece. And I want it to stick past about 1/4 inch on either side. But I don't want it to be any smaller, so that if I slide it all the way one way, I want at least 1/4 inch sticking out on this side. But if I don't want any more than 1/2 inch sticking out on this side because I want to have a little bit of gap for expansion and contraction. Then we're going to have to do the same thing for the length on this and plane down the other end. So for that, we can put it in this groove, stick it in here, and then make sure lengthwise it's no more than a 1/2 inch longer from inside of the dovetail to inside the dovetail. In this case, I think I'm a good bit long on this. Yes, I am a good bit long on this. That's because I haven't jointed off this edge here yet. So we're going to do the same thing on here.
Is there a way to show that at a different angle? It was really hard to see that it was too long. I don't know if anybody cares. It just was hard to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, because what I'll do, here, I'll slide in here. So in this case, I'm going to slide up this end so that the end of the board is flush with the edge of the dovetails here. Let me see if I can show you that a little bit better. So the inside of the dovetails here, it's flush with the end of the board. Then down at this end, I'm sticking out just a little over a 1/2 inch past. And what that means is I have a 1/4 inch groove on either end to stick into, so it's actually sticking out a little bit more. So I need to take a little bit off the length just to bring it down to the right size. And I cut it a little bit big so I could do that. So for that, I'm going to put it in the visor, lock it down, and this is the unfinished end. So I haven't done anything to this. This is the end that I cut off earlier. So I can put this on the side here and check, and sure enough, I'm high in the middle. And because it's on the end here, I'm going to use my low angle to pin it down. Now, one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go right through and off the other end. If I go off the other end of the board, let me zoom that back around for you. I think I'm too far away. Focus in, and up, and up, and up. Oh, there we go. That's better. I don't want to go all the way through and off the board because all these fibers sticking in, I'm going to end up breaking those off. So I'm going to plane from here over to somewhere around here, about 1 inch away from the end, and I'm going to stop out. And what that's doing is that's lowering this end, and so the whole edge of the board is going down and down and down. So I'm lowering this corner, but I'm not touching this corner. So there's kind of a line coming up. So if I put this on here, now what I've got is I'm high here and low here, but only by a hair. I need to come down a little bit more. I'll show you why in just a moment. Now, if I had a good shooting board set up, I could just put this on the shooting board and do that. But I like doing it freehand just because it's fun. Okay, so now I'm tight on this corner, and I've got a 32nd of a gap here on the end of this. And that means we can turn the plane around. We can go left-handed. And now I can push from here to about here on the board, not going all the way through again. And just after a couple passes of doing that, now I know I'm flat across. And just a couple more passes. So as long as I don't go out the other end, and there's always some sole to reference on this far side, I'm going to actually be cutting an angle. So I'm cutting a taper that's thick on this end and then tapering down to nothing at this edge. And perfect. Now we're perfectly flat all the way across and referenced on that edge. So now we have a board. Let me just see how close we got.
Pause you for a second.
Yeah, what you got?
Because Alan did a drive-by hot cocoa fun and wants a mom joke.
What's the mom joke?
Should I do the one I told you earlier?
Yeah, go for it.
So my husband calls me the bomb. Not sure if it's because I'm super sexy or that I might go off at any minute.
It's because you're sexy. So now we can put it back in there and check again. We're flush up with the dovetails at this end, and this end we're sticking out slightly less than a 1/2 inch. And so because of that, when I even this out, now it'll be sticking out slightly less than a 1/4 inch on either end, so we are the right length from end to end. And I can check it this way, but because I know I'm square, I know I'm exactly where I should be. Hey, look at that, it's right on this edge too. So we had to go back to where we were earlier and plane down the edge to fit into the groove. Any questions while I'm setting up?
I do have a couple questions.
Cool, what you got?
So Tom West asked, what kind of bench dogs are those blue ones?
The blue ones are bench dogs. Bench dogs. Let me grab one that's not in there. Oh, where'd they go? Oops, there we are. They're the blue ones I got on Amazon. And the aluminum with the silver ones are bench pups. They're the exact same thing as this. They're just shorter. So I've got 4 of these that I use regularly, and then I have these bench pups that I use from time to time when I need more. Yeah, where was I at with this? Okay, so let's put this in here and see. So we're tight there, and it doesn't fit into the groove the rest of the way along, if I remember correctly. Yep. So I still got a little bit more work to do on that. Before I go any farther, let me pop this one up. It's just stuck down too far. Whenever the bench dogs stick down in the hole too far, get a flat blade screwdriver, and I can pry them up. Most of them I can reach underneath and push up, but this one actually goes into the leg of the vise, and so because of that, I can't reach underneath.
I bet I could. It took you a second to figure out what I was saying, and that was priceless.
I love you, babe. Okay, let's get back to this. And because I know I'm good right here on the end, I'm not hitting that spot. I'm just hitting where I know I need to do a bit more work. And again, I have the plane skewed at about a 45-degree angle. I'm picking up the heel, so back here at the heel, it's about an inch off of the board. Here at the mouth, it's getting closer and closer because I'm at a beveled angle. Let's see what we got here. Okay, in tight, not in, not in, not in, not in. Need a little bit more still. We're close though, we're really close. Okay. There we go, we're getting close there. Okay, we're in here, we're not in here, we're not in here. And then I need more of that all the way along there. Okay, cool. And so if you just sneak up on it, do a couple passes, test it, do a couple passes and test it. Eventually you'll be left with something that will slide in there, be a nice tight fit, it will slide all the way along. So I'm stopping here, so that means it's not going to fit there. Yeah, it's really, really close. So now I just need to plane from here to here and stop at this point. Let's see what we got there. Still tight right there. Still tight right there. Tight, tight, and really tight here in the corner. So that means I got to spend more time in this corner. Just like that. Let's see what that gives us. Hey, hey, hey. There we go. It's got a nice friction fit all the way along there. That's what I want. Now we have to do the end panel. And we're going to do this the exact same way, but you have to be careful with the end grain when you're going across the board. So I'm actually going to put it into this where I'm going to use all four dogs here. Open up the jaw. Any questions while I'm setting this up?
Let's see. Brian Ross asked, does the glue damage the plane iron?
No. Nope. Glue is plenty soft enough not to be a problem at all. And if you've ever wondered about it, you can actually plane aluminum. I've done a couple videos where I've had brass that have been planing. You can do that perfectly fine. It's softer than the iron. Then we're going to do the same thing on here, but rather than just skewing it, let me focus that up a little bit. Rather than, whoa, my tripod's falling.
Be careful trying to catch tools off the bench.
Yeah, I sliced my finger up this week. Chisel was spinning off the bench and I went to grab it and it spun a little bit farther and I pushed it off the bench. Blade first, caught the blade and pushed it. Oh well. So, rather than going straight across the board or even skewing it a little bit, I'm actually going to skew it a long ways, a little bit past 45. And then also again lift up the heel here so it's sliding in an angle there. And get it close. Still a good bit fat. Nothing for my wife.
I didn't know that needed clarification.
See, that gets us. Okay, we're tight to there, and we're stopping at this point. And we're good over here, actually. So I just need this little bit here in the middle, just just a pass or two. So I'm not going to start all the way back here. I'm actually going to start in the middle and just hit the spot that needs it. And that should be enough. No, I still need a little bit more right there. Sneaking up on it. There we go. That's the tight fit I'm looking for. So now we have this on all 4 sides. It fits into our groove. And that is our bottom. What time we got? 8:21. Sweet, we're doing good. So that is the bottom. This is one of the things that I like to do. I like to pillow it. I like to leave the rough sawn on there. That just makes it feel nice. At least for me. If you're different and you want it perfectly smooth, then plane it smooth. It's that simple. But there's something about it that I just like being able to look underneath the bottom of a, oops, they're falling, on the bottom of a drawer or something like that, and seeing the hand cut markings from someone who actually resawed this by hand. It says, ooh, okay, that's nice. I like that.
Okay, that was just like bright light. You could
this is alder, and that's why I'm doing this out of red oak.
When you turned it, it wasn't so bad. There! Oh no, when you angle it down. Yeah, then like you can kind of see the roughness. It's just the way you held it.
So, next thing we need is we're going to work a little bit on the divider. So on our divider, this again is about 3/8 of an inch thick. So this is the rough sawn from the resawing. But with this, we actually want to fit it into a groove and into dados. So for that, what we want to do is go and pick our grooving plane. So it may be the exact same grooving plane or method you use to create the groove for the bottoms of these. In this case, I'm actually going to choose one with a slightly wider blade because I'm using my Stanley 55. In this case, I can put whatever blade into it. And so I went over to my collection and I found a blade that was thinner than the stock that I have already, but not so much thinner. So it's slightly thicker than 1/4 inch. Just that's the way it came from the factory. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that blade and I'm going to set up a marking gauge right to that blade. Any questions while I'm setting this?
So Tom West has had a couple questions come up, but they're all sort of related. So, one, is a low angle better for end grain?
Yes.
Okay. And then would going across the grain like you were doing tear out the grain at the end?
At the very end there, no. The one where I have the board standing up on end and I'm going across the end of the board, as long as I don't go out the end. That's why I was stopping short. If you stop short, it's not going to splinter out the grain. Okay. With the one I just had here going across the board, no, that's not going to tear out the grain. Because there's enough fibers there to support it still.
So are you lifting it at the end, or are you just...
No, not on that one.
Okay.
That's just for the other one. All right. And focus. So let me switch over to camera 2 and show you what I'm doing for this. So what I've done is I've chosen the blade that I want to use for the plow, for the groove for this. And I'm going to take my marking gauge and I'm going to set my marking gauge up to that iron thickness. And this way, I can make sure that my board will fit my groove. Just a little more. Wow, it's tighter than I thought. There we go. No more. Actually hit the thing. There we go. Now I've got a mark that is precisely the same amount wide as my iron on here. So what I can do with that is I can grab this board that we resawed down and I can put a new mark on its edge going all the way around the board. And that new mark will then be what I can plane this down to that thickness. In this case, you can see I'm just taking off a tiny, tiny little bit. I don't know if you can see it or not, because lines and wood don't always show up well in camera. And so I can go all the way around this, and then just like normal, plane it down to that line. Now I'm not going to go through planing it all down. I'm just going to show you the basics of it. But this is one of these basic processes of being able to thickness a board down to the line. So what I'm going to do on here is I'm going to look at this board. I'm going to focus on this board first.
Yeah,
Come on, focus. There we go. So I don't know if you guys can see this.
maybe a little bit.
There's a little bit of a line here, and I've got, about a 1/16 of an inch here away from the line. And down this corner, it's almost right on that line. And that's the thinnest point of this whole board. And so in this case, I'm going to plane over here where I have material to take off. I'm not going to plane over here. And so this whole time, I'm going to be looking at this board all the way around on that line, all the way around. And if I see it's getting close to that line, I'm not going to plane in that spot. I'm only going to plane in the places where it's big, where there's a lot of material to take off, until eventually I get it nice and flat and it has the same amount of line all the way around. And then I can take even strokes from one end to the other and get this board nice and smooth and true from end to end. And so it's all about planing it down to that line. And because I have my iron picked out already, once I plane this down to that line, I know that this will fit into the groove that I make with the iron. And if I really want to make sure this will fit into the groove, then what I'll do is I'm going to take my plane iron and I'm going to cut a test groove in some scrap piece of wood. And then I can use that scrap piece to then use it as a gauge to check the board all the way around. Oh, it's not fitting on here. I need to plane a little bit more. Oh, it's fitting on here. That's exactly where I want it. And I can use that as a gauge to know exactly what the thickness of this board is. Now it's going to take a few minutes, so I'm actually going to leave that aside. That's something that most people can do on their own. So just imagine that this is plain and nice and smooth. Woo, excuse me. What questions we got?
Nada.
Nada. Okay, good. So the next thing I want to do is we need to have a groove in the bottom of this board to support this divider. And then we need to have a dado in both of the end planks for this divider to socket into. So the groove is a really easy thing. I've got my 55 that I set up earlier with the iron that I was using to make the thickness of the board. And I'm going to set the iron about 2 inches away from the edge. It doesn't matter how far in your divider is. I like about 2 inches because what that gives me is it gives me a thinner space over on this side. And that thinner space is a place where I can put my saws, I can put my chisels. They're not going to roll around. It's going to stop things from going around. And then I have a larger area over here that I can put my planes in and other things that I want to sit flat. So having a thin space over here, like 1.5 to 2 inches, makes it very useful for chisels and saws and other things I don't want to be moving around too much. So if you don't know how to set up a 45 or 55, I just put out a video on that. You can go over and take a look at that. And I have my iron set about 2 inches-ish away from the fence. I didn't measure anything. I just put it there, and that's where we're going to cut. So we can grab our board and put it back into our vise just like we had a moment ago and run a groove in. Now with this groove, we do not want this groove to be very big. We want it to be very, very, very thin. Only like 3 or 4 shavings. I want just enough so when that divider fits in there, the divider doesn't want to slide around. I just want to catch it. If we go too deep, we're going to be weakening our bottom. Not that that's a huge issue. But really, all we need is just a little bit to hold it in place. So I'm going to set the fence on here. Skipped off. There's 1 shaving deep. Two shavings deep. And I want it to be a 1/16 inch or so or less. I'm actually going to back it up. It's cutting a pretty heavy groove. And you'll notice it chattering is you get these lines across the bottom. Let me see if I can show you this, because this is a common problem with setting up 45s and 55s.
So if you don't have a 45 or a 55, how would you do this?
You'd make your own grooving plane, which I have a couple of videos showing that. Or you could cut it with a saw on either side and then chisel out in between. We talked about that a bit more when we did the groove and the end boards. So if you want to see that, check back to there. I don't know if you guys can see this. Where are we at? Right here.
You got to change your camera.
Oh, that would help. So there are all these little ridges inside this groove, and the groove might not be deep enough for you to see it, but you'll see like the groove is running through here, and you'll see all these little ridges coming across. And what that means is when the chisel comes through here, it's actually bouncing. It's like skipping as it comes through here. It goes skip, 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 skip. And that causes chattering as the blade kind of bounces through the cut. And that means you're taking a cut that's a bit too heavy. So back it off a little bit. That sounds better. And that's giving me a smoother cut on the bottom. It's more of a zippy sound than a chattery sound. There, and that's all we want. This groove is less than a 16th. Not quite a 32nd. It's pretty shallow. That's all we want in here. It's enough that when that board goes in there, it's not going to be sliding around. Next thing we need to do is we need to get a place, we need to transfer the marks from this groove onto our end boards. What are we at? 32? Good, good, good. Drill, bending. Yeah, we'll do this. So I'm trying to get everything in today so that we only have one more show next week. So the next thing we want to do is we want to put our board into one of our end caps. And then, let me show you this on here. Oh, good, you can see it. I'm going to switch over to 2. Is I can grab my marking knife, and in here I'm going to split out the board so that there's an even amount sticking out on both sides. And it really doesn't matter how much is sticking out as long as it's about the same eyeball that's sticking out on this side as sticking out on that side. Use my marking knife, and I'm going to reach in. Let me see if I can turn it this way so you can see the groove a little bit. Reach in here, put my marking knife on that groove, and mark it out. Put my marking knife on that groove, and mark it out. And there is my width of the groove. Now the next thing I need is my length of the groove. So to find the length, we're going to put this in here, slide it into that groove, and then I can come out here and I can mark out the length of the groove. So I just have 3 little tick marks in here. One is the width of the groove, or 2 are the width of the groove, and another one is out here at the length of the groove. So I can pull this board out, bring in a square, and with this square I'm going to extend these nicks that I just made, put the knife into that nick, slide the square up against it, and I'm going to mark up until I get to, where is that one? There's the top of the board. Deepen that a little bit. And I'm going to come up to that stop mark. And then I'm going to come up to that stop mark. And then I'm going to grab my chisel that happens to be the same width. I'm going to set that in there and just give it a light little tap. And there is the outline of the dado that I need to make in here. Now next time, 34. Yeah, let's go ahead and cut this. We got time for this. We can do this. Okay, so let me just make sure I'm right where I want to be. Yes and yes. So there is my dado marked out on here. I'm going to bring in my vise so that I can clamp it up nice and tight here. Half my life is spent moving vices in and out. There. So let's zoom in on this so we can see this a little bit better. This line right here. Unfortunately.
Whoa.
Let's see if that'll see. Ah, it's sinking again. Maybe I should get a better tripod.
You have a birthday coming up. Is that what you want for your birthday?
I want a tripod.
Valentine's
There we
Day,
go.
folks. James' birthday coming up.
Let's grab the offending chisel. This chisel sliced my finger open yesterday, or 2 days ago. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put this, in this case, I'm actually going to put it right into that marking gauge line. And I'm going to lean it away from the line a little bit. I'm just going to give it a light tap. Then move over. And this is going to expand that line just a little bit, not much, but enough to give me a little bit of wiggle room when putting the the board in place. That's why I'm also aiming it into the dado rather than away from the dado. Come in and do the same thing on the other side. And the most important one is this first trace all the way around in that marking gauge line. And then we can come in with the chisel that is the right width, put it in here, and grab a different chisel, a different mallet. One can never have enough mallets. So now I'm going to put it in here, bevel down.
Wait. You're not focused.
There. Is that better?
Now it's better.
Now it's focused? Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put it in here, bevel down, and then just lightly tap it.
Oh, it went out of focus again.
What?
It's like going in and out of focus.
Oop, too deep. Gotta chop down a little bit deeper here. There, now it'll come out. And just like that, we're starting to make our dado. And so we've come down a 1/16 inch or so. In this case, we're just going to put it right back in that line. This time I can hit it a little bit harder because that wall will hold it in place. And we're just going to lay out this line a little bit deeper. Now the other option is we can do this with a router plane, as long as you have one with a blade that will fit down into this groove. So let me show you what the router plane looks like. Oop. Come out. There we go. With the router plane, I can adjust its depth so that I can take off a little bit each time. So I'm going to set it down to like something around here. With the router plane, I can come in here and I can make sure I have a really nice flat bottom. Loosen it up, set it in a little bit deeper. Because I'm going cross-grained and I've already chopped out those walls, I can take it out pretty deep pretty quickly. And I'll chisel from one side because it'll do a dive cut in, turn it around, and then chisel from the other direction. Set it in a little bit deeper, and do it again. No, that's too deep. So that means I gotta chop this down a little bit deeper. So if you find yourself jamming, don't push it harder. Clean it out so there's nothing impeding it from moving forward. Just set that right into the line. Taps it down. There we go. And come back in with the router plane. This is a fun part. Because we can take it down to depth here. Turn around, then bring the chisel back in. Cut in those knife walls a little bit deeper. And then route it out again. And we're just going to route this out down to the same depth as our other groove here. And if you don't have a router plane, then you just do it with a chisel. Just as I showed before, set the chisel in here, bevel down, it does the exact same thing. Just not quite as fun as a router plane. The router plane is also pretty easy because you just set it and forget it. You just put it in and it takes care of bringing everything down to the exact same height. There. I think I have about one more pass to go to get this down to the correct depth. Zoom in a little bit and show you what this looks like. There we go. So we've got our dado in here. And if our board were thickness down to the right thickness, it would slide right in there. All right, here's the corner of the board that was cut, that's really, really tight. But the other side won't fit in because it's too fat. And this will then be what holds this divider in place and keeps it from moving side to side. Now we need to transfer these marks onto the other end. So what I do is I bring my other one over here, and rather than setting this board up again on this one, the important thing is getting these the same distance in from this corner. So I'm going to line up these two corners precisely to be the same. And then I'm going to grab, where'd it go? Straight edge. There we are. I'm going to grab a straight edge here, and I'm going to put it right along that line. And just like before, I'm going to make a little nick, put it right on the edge of this one, make a little nick, and then I have this set up to be basically the exact same thing I did before. We can set this on here and then mark the length of the dado right here, and then bring in our square again and set up the lines just like we did on the other side. Bring these lines all the way up to the stop mark, and then cut this one exactly like we cut this one. So it's a fairly straightforward process. The only thing is you want to make sure you transfer the marks from this board over to this board to make sure that the distance from this sidewall to this corner is the exact same on this one. Otherwise, when the two pieces go end to end, your divider won't be parallel to the outside. Your divider would be canted one way or the other if these two grooves don't line up from end to end. So that's why it's important to transfer it from one spot to the other. So any questions now while I'm flipping this around?
Let's see. Earl Ledoux says, do you think the groove might make a weak spot in the bottom?
It will make the weak spot, yes. However, it will not be weak enough to cause a problem. No. Remember, that's one of the reasons why I'm keeping this board at 3/8 rather than planing it all down nice and smooth, is because it provides a little bit more tightness to it. But a 1/4 inch is more than enough thickness needed for the bottom of this to hold a. I would have no problem holding a half dozen planes and 4 or 5 saws and pretty much as much tools as you can possibly fit into that. It won't cause this bottom to deflect enough to cause any issue at all. So putting a slight groove in there is not going to remove enough material from this to weaken it to a point where it becomes dangerous. What it does provide is it stops that center plank from bending anywhere in and out. If that plank can be bent in far enough, it will actually pop out of the track. So we want to make sure it doesn't bend inside of there. And just having that little bit of groove. I mean, it's less than a 1/16 inch. It's just a few shavings thick. That little bit of a groove is enough to keep that divider from bouncing around. So, any other questions?
One last one.
Okay. Before we get into the bending, what we got?
It's a little off topic. I don't know if you want to wait or just go ahead and answer it.
Let's wait. Let me do this one then. It's a different topic. So what I should have had is this we talked about last time. It's a 4-inch PVC pipe with a cap on the end glued into place. And what I should have done is had my 3/4 inch dowel soaking in this for 2 days. And I'm just going to let it soak in there for 2 days. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow...
Put it in and then pull it out and be like, it's the magic of TV.
Yeah. Magic of YouTube. And what that's going to do is it's going to completely soak this wood. It's going to basically take it back to where it was green wood. If it's kiln dried, it's never going to quite get back to where it's green wood. If it was air dried, it's never going to quite get back to where it was green wood. But it's going to make it far more flexible. It's not going to make it flexible enough to bend it and hold a form though. So we're going to soak it in that for 2 days, let it soak up as much water as it possibly can. And then I'm going to go upstairs and I'm going to fill up a large pot of water. I'm going to need about 2 to 3 gallons depending upon the pipe you use. And I'm going to put it on the stove and I'm going to let it heat up until it is a rolling boil. And I want to get that water as hot as I possibly can. Then I'm going to come out here and I'm going to have a way of holding this, either putting it in a vise or actually what I did is I took it outside to one of my deck chairs. And there was weaving in the bottom of the deck chair underneath the padding, and I just jammed this down into the weaving and it held it up vertically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump out all the water that's in here, leave the stick in here. It's now no water in here except for the stick. And then I'm going to bring out that pot of boiling water, and I'm going to dump that pot of boiling water into this and throw a blanket or something over the top just to keep the steam from coming out and letting it boil, letting it cool off too quickly. Insulate it if possible, particularly if it's cold outside. And I'm going to let it sit in there with the boiling water. Actually, it's not quite boiling anymore because it cooled off a little bit. But I'm going to let it sit in there for about 30 to 35 minutes. Enough that there is a lot of energy in there. That heat is really moving things around. And what it will do is make it pliable. With the mixture of it being completely waterlogged and completely warm, or hot, it's still to the point where you don't want your hand anywhere near that. It will bend very easily. And so we'll have our form that we made last time. And in one quick movement, this is one of the tricky parts, once you pull it out of there, it's been in there for about 30-35 minutes. You put it in the form onto the first peg, you set it onto the second peg, and then you bend it back into place slowly. We don't want to move it very quickly. We just want to bend it slowly and pop it down in place. And the whole bending process should take 10 to 20 seconds to bend it down into place. If you bend it too fast, it might stress the wood out. Also keep in mind when you're bending it, you're not actually bending the fibers. What you're doing is you're crushing the inside fibers. The outside fibers don't stretch. They stay the same length, but the inside fibers will crush. And so you're giving it time to crush all these fibers in place. You bend it into place, and once you lock it between these 4 pegs, you take this board that everything's framed on and you set it aside, and you leave it on this for another 2 days. And that's going to let this rod dry out completely, or pretty close to completely. And then after 2 days, oh look, it's done. That's really all there is to it. Let it soak up enough water for 2 days. Let it sit in boiling water for about 30-35 minutes. And then quickly put it on the frame and bend it back into shape. Let it sit for 2 days on this, and you've got your handle. It's one of those things that is very daunting the first time you do it, but once you do it, it's like, oh, okay, that's really all there is to it. And once you have the whole setup in place, you have the frame set up and the boiling set, you could do quite a few of these. I actually had the first time I had it set up, I had 3 sticks in there that I was soaking for 2 days. And then I left 3 sticks in there for the boiling process, and I bent 1, 2, and 3 all on top of each other. I left the pegs on this sticking out long enough so that I could put 3 handles on top of each other and bend them all at the same time. So rather than just having the pegs, because in the plans I have the pegs 1.5 inches into the wood and then 1.5 inches out of the wood being 3 inches long, that still is long enough you could actually bend 2 handles at one time. So if for some reason you broke one, well, you have another one sitting there. Usually the only reason you're going to run into actually breaking a handle is that the grain isn't straight. And so that's probably the key, most important thing is when you pick it, make sure you pick a dowel with really nice straight grain. You don't want any grain running out the sides. That will be the point, the weak point which it breaks off on. So if you have any questions about that, throw those in the comments right now. I think I'm going to hit a few questions here. I was really wanting to show that off because it is a fairly straightforward process. I just have the boiling water, bring it down here and pour it in there, and then pull the stick out and bend it. That's about all there is to it. Next week, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking the handle, and we're actually going to be assembling this all together. So what we'll have is we now have all the pieces that are in the frame, but the 2 end caps can come off, and if the 2 end caps come off, the whole thing falls apart. So we're going to take our bent handle next week, and we're going to trim it to length. We're going to drill the holes that it goes into, and then we're going to put in dowel pins to keep the 2 sides from coming off. And this is the final piece that holds it all together so that all the joinery is put together without glue, unless you put glue on the bottom, for those of you who want to do that. So what questions we got?
So Bear Creek Woodworking asks, does boiling water work better than using steam?
The thing with boiling water is you don't have to build a steam box. All you need is a pipe to stick it in. With doing it with steam, the nice thing is you don't have to soak it overnight. You can do it straight from dry wood because the steam will get into the wood faster. The problem with doing steam is you have to build a steam box. So you have to have a sealed container that the steam can flow into and the pressure can let out at the other end. and then you have to have a place for the condensation to drip out. And then you have to have a constant source of steam coming into it. So in past times, that was a boiling pot on a fire with then a hose coming off of it, so that the steam coming off the boiling pot would then go through the tube. And then you have to keep it in that for, well, depending upon your thickness, for a 3/4 inch stick, you're probably looking at about 45 minutes or so, somewhere up to, there are a lot of rules of thumb for this, but most people say about an hour of steaming per inch of thickness. And so it's a far more complicated system to use steam. The nice thing about steam is you don't have to worry about pre-soaking it. It's wet. The steam will work its way into the wood. So it's two different processes. The boiling bath is far less complicated and far less things needed, whereas the steaming requires a constant heat source. The plumbing going from the water to the steam box needs a steam box that you can get in and out of. There's just a lot of other things you have to think through for that. I do want to build a steam box, but every time I've wanted to build a steam box, I just need to bend one or two things, and in which case I don't want to build an entire steam box just to bend a handle. I've got plumbing sitting around. I can dunk boiling water in it and make it work. So that's the big reason why I'm doing the boiling water over the steaming. If you have a steam box, then go ahead and do a steam box. You don't have to let it soak over the 2 nights beforehand. What else we got? Good question, though. Thank you.
Tom West asked, could you just boil the wood instead of letting it sit in water for 2 days beforehand?
No, just straight boiling water will not go into the wood as far. You need to have it soaked all the way through. What soaking it all the way through does is it gets water all the way into the inside. The boiling water will then transfer the energy through the moisture that's in the wood already. But the boiling water is not enough to actually get into the wood. It doesn't work its way in as well as steam does. So yeah, that's one of those weird things.
So then Idle Hands Workshop Stephen Miller asked, if you use glycerine instead of water, would you be able to make the wood more pliable and perhaps get a greater curve?
I have no idea.
Okay.
You can actually get impressive curves out of this. A 3/4 inch rod, you can put that down into about a 18-inch diameter. So it'd be like taking this rod and bringing the handle back down around to like here. And with a full steam bath, you could do that. So this is just a slight bend for what is needed for this. We don't need anything amazing for this. But yes, you can bend it much, much more. If you've ever seen some of the Windsor chair backs, some of those bends are incredible. You need really, really straight grain for that.
So let's see. Clean Cut Woodworking asked, does it matter what cut of the tree you'd ideally want to use?
No, as long as it's straight grained. I have seen people do it with limbwood. It works perfectly fine as long as it's straight grained. Because the reason is if any of the grain runs out the edge of the board, that's where it's going to split. And when you bend it on that, all those loose fibers are just going to open up. Whereas if the fibers go all the way from end to end, there is no loose fiber to stick up. But with this slight of a bend, that's not something you have to worry about immensely, because there's not that much of a bend to it to cause the fibers to stick up. But it does a little bit. I think I had one here that failed. Yeah, this one. No, this was the early test. This was my first test where I was trying to bend it. And this is the one that I just soaked in boiling water. So rather than bathing it the day before. So I had like 45 minutes of boiling water was in. And I was able to bend it that far before it started breaking. So yeah, that's why we do the 2 days before soaking it. What else?
All right, so this is the last question, and it's a little off topic.
Okay.
So Kylie says, I understand that you are a heavy English style tool user, and I know you've spoken about Japanese saws. Any experience with Japanese chisels and your thoughts?
I have a few Japanese chisels, and I have 2 of them in the chisel test that I'm going to be doing here soon. They're great chisels. They do the exact same thing as any other chisel. The big benefit to them is they scalloped out at the back, so you don't have to worry about flattening them because it takes far less work to flatten them. But in all honesty, you flatten a chisel once, so it's not something to think about too much. And because they scallop out the back, then you occasionally, when you sharpen them enough, you have to re-bend in the edge. I'm trying to remember the term for that. I can't remember it. But you have to do maintenance on them occasionally when you sharpen them back to that scalloping. So in all honesty, I don't see the benefit outweighing. I see that the benefit is less than the work that's provided. Also, if you're doing small piece referencing, having that scalloping out of the back becomes a little bit more difficult. So I don't use them because I find that to be more of a hindrance than a benefit, but there are a lot of people out there who think that's far more of a benefit than a hindrance. So each their own. It's just a different type of chisel for a different type of person. Is that the last question?
That was the last question.
Cool. Well, next week we're going to be getting together and finishing this thing up, so hopefully we'll have a whole tote sitting here on the bench. As long as I remember to put the water in 2 days beforehand. I can't believe I forgot that. I had memos in my calendar to remind me.
You were pretty tired when you were
home
on Sunday.
I got back at 1 a.m. So, oh well.
And then you slept all day.
Yeah. So, I think that'll do it for this week. If you do have any questions, let me know in the email or messaging like that. And if you are interested in doing the straight razor build, let me know because I'm really looking forward to playing with this. What else am I going to do when I buy 35 straight razor blanks?
Put up
people at the place were like, "Why in the world were you buying all those blanks? Or why did anyone have 35 of them to sell?" So yeah. Okay, I think that'll do it. So until next time, have a wonderful day.
Oh, you are holding it. Okay,
I'm holding it.
Good night.